Hey guys, it's Aimee here, and today I bring you my January wrap-up. So I read 11 things in January. I'm just going to jump straight into the books because I don't want this video to be crazy long. So beginning with my lowest star rating. I've already had two-star reads this year, and both of them were really disappointing, and I was really annoyed that I continued reading them when I came to the end. I kind of just wished that I had DNF'd them, but I didn't because I wanted to push through. The first one was Nod by Adrian Barnes. This is an apocalyptic story, and it begins with all of the people on the planet, or the majority of the people on the planet, being unable to sleep, and so people start losing their minds and going crazy, and you know, all the things that may happen if you go for a very long time without sleeping. The main character in this is able to sleep, so he's one of the few people who can sleep, and that to me sounded really interesting, but I just don't think this book was long enough to fully explain all of the ideas. Like, it just seemed very experimental in the way that it was written. It left loads of things like unexplained, and I just didn't feel like I understood what was going on half the time. Like, I definitely feel like maybe this was just too high above my head. Like, I imagine Adrian Barnes is a very intelligent man, and I think he was going for something with this book, but I think it just completely missed me. I also really didn't like the way that women were portrayed in this novel. Like, there weren't very many women to begin with anyway. It all just kind of focused solely on this man who just seemed to be so wrapped up in his own head. But the women that were there were either there for sexual purposes or for him to kind of really berate on the way they looked because they could no longer sleep and they looked terrible because they hadn't slept in weeks. And so most of the discussions on women were like, oh god, she looks horrible, like I can't believe, like, I don't want to have sex with her, like, all this. It was all centered around like whether he wanted to have sex with them or like how disgusting they looked, and that I didn't like at all. Like, there was no, I don't know, no real connection to anyone else other than this girlfriend that he had, and he was horrible to her. It was just a really bizarre novel. Like, I'd love to hear if you've read this book and what you thought of it, because I don't know whether it was just too high above my intelligence level or if it just was a really badly written book. My second two-star read of the month, which may be a bit of a controversial one to be honest, it is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. This one had a lot of hype about it, and in fact it won the Pulitzer Prize in 2014. I hated it. I came to the end of this book and was like, why did I waste my life reading like nearly 900 pages of a book that like was just awful? To try and tie it up in a nutshell, this book focuses on a young boy whose mother dies in a terrorist attack whilst they're in an art gallery. He then steals this painting called The Goldfinch and keeps it for himself and doesn't tell anyone for years that he's got this painting hidden, and like all these like art collectors and stuff are like, and the police and everything are looking for this painting, and no one has yet to kind of connect the fact that he was in that room and he managed to survive this terrorist attack. The relationship between him and his mum was fantastic, and I loved like how he kept going back to that, but I felt that that was kind of lost because he then moves from New York away from like this really great storyline that was happening there and just gets dumped in Las Vegas, where he like gets addicted to drugs and meets this horrible guy called Boris, and it's just like, I didn't get why that needed to be there. Like, the story was so good, and the story that she was building in New York was fantastic, and eventually you come back to that, but probably after about 400 pages of him wasting time doing drugs in Las Vegas, it just seemed so pointless. And it also seemed like all of the characters were on some sort of like competition for who had the most worst life. Like, oh, my mum's died, oh, but yeah, I was abused, oh, but this, and like everything was just like, it seemed so like silly. Like, every time something like that happened I was just like, alright, like I feel nothing for these characters, so I don't care that this is happening. I definitely don't see why this is rated as highly as it was. It definitely doesn't come anywhere near as good as The Secret History for me. I would love to know your experience with this book, because I know a lot of people love it, and I'm really sorry if I've just like dissed your favourite book, but I just didn't understand it at all. Moving on to my 3-star reads for the month. Firstly, we have The Tigerboy by Ted Hughes. This is just a really sweet and short little children's story that I would kind of liken to like a fable or something, you know, like Aesop's fables. It basically follows this little boy who turns into a tiger, and I just thought it was really sweet. I mean, I wasn't blown away by it. It took me probably about 15 minutes to read, but definitely if you've maybe got children and you want to introduce them to something like this, it's just a beautiful little thing to hold. Or maybe if you're looking for a gift for someone and you know that they like Ted Hughes, this is definitely something I would consider giving as a gift. And my other 3-star read was The Road Through the Wall by Shirley Jackson. The story focuses on like one street of people, and you go in and out of their houses and see the kind of story develop, kind of dotting in and out of their perspectives. But the beginning kind of chunk of the the book was way too much of describing like exactly where on the street like all these people lived in relation to each other, and I just didn't think that was particularly necessary because I became a little bit bored. It's like, yeah, you've written the story, I don't really care like in relation to everyone where these people live, like you can just get on with the story now. I just liked seeing this kind of slice of history, I guess, and how the people interact with each other, and especially how the parents treat their children and how they kind of want to take control of their lives but then fully don't understand what are going on in their children's lives, as it is all throughout history, I guess. But in this I just found it particularly interesting because you see through the perspective of all the children but then also the adults as well, and I just thought that was really great. At the end of this book there's like an event that happens which is slightly shocking, and I felt like it was a little bit out of context with the whole rest of the story. Like I didn't see it coming, maybe I just wasn't paying attention well enough, but I just was a bit taken aback by what happened at the end, and I felt it was a bit too rushed and a bit too unexplained. Like I just was like, oh okay, and then it was the end of the story. So I don't know, I think that is like a thing with Shirley Jackson though, like how she like lets the story out and then you really kind of have to take your own like decisions from it. So yeah, I did enjoy it. I'm looking forward to seeing how the journey with Shirley Jackson goes, so stick around for that if you're interested. Moving on to my 4-star reads for the month, and firstly we have Emma by Jane Austen. I really enjoyed this one. It basically follows a young lady named Emma, and Emma is kind of professing that she never wants love and she doesn't ever want to be married, and she's happy to kind of tinker with her friends' love lives and try and set people up, and it doesn't always go her way and it doesn't always go how she expects it, and she doesn't always really understand things as well as other people do. She thinks that she fully understands love and that she knows what people want, and she's not always right. As with Jane Austen and all of the ones I've read so far, the characters are just brilliant. They're so witty, they're so like perfect in their own right. Emma's dad in this was like a hypochondriac, like constantly worried that people were going to get sick, and that like he wanted to call the doctor all the time and he didn't want to leave at certain times of the day, like leave his house in case he got unwell, and that was just such a quaint, like wonderful little character, and I love that. And all of the characters in this book were exactly like that. They were all just perfectly formed and brilliantly written, and I thought it was really, really great. So if you are looking for a Jane Austen read and you haven't picked this one up yet, I would highly, highly recommend. Next for my 4-star reads we have some poetry, which I never ever speak about on this channel because I never really read poetry, so I am trying to delve a bit more into it this year. This is Cherry Pie by Hollie McNish. This book was wonderful, and I think it was really good for someone who doesn't really read poetry all that much. Like I don't know if I'm clever enough to read poetry sometimes. Like I don't know if I'm really fully understanding it and getting as much as some people can. And I also find that I understand poetry a lot more when I hear people read it out loud. Anyway, this book is so wonderful because it's not only just poetry, it also has like wonderful little like illustrations and really beautiful little things. Like this one here I really liked. I took a little picture on my Instagram actually of it, called Moon, and it's just got this beautiful, like, just, I love these pictures and stuff. It definitely made it like a bit of more of an enjoyable experience. There are some really great ones on women and feminism and like her like elderly relatives and stuff. Like they are like permeated through this book, like her connection with her grandparents, and I love that. There's also some really great ones that got me thinking about kind of refugees or immigrants and people moving into your own country and your space and how that feels, and oh, it was just really, really great. So if you're maybe not like into poetry or if you're a beginner, I would definitely recommend this one. It's Cherry Pie. It says it by Hollie Poetry, but I'm pretty sure her name is Hollie McNish. So if you want to go and look for that one, there you go. Next for my 4-star reads we have a classic, and that is Death in the Clouds by Agatha Christie. I think this might take the top spot for my favourite Agatha Christie book that I've read so far. This is one of the Hercule Poirot stories. I love Poirot so much. He is my favourite Agatha Christie character. As the title suggests, death happens in the sky. Poirot is on a flight somewhere and someone is murdered and a mysterious wasp may be involved. If you're a lover of Agatha Christie, or if you haven't started reading Agatha Christie yet, I have been asked a number of times actually like where to begin with the Poirot books because there are quite a few of them. Honestly, I have not read them in order. I don't know how many there are. I think maybe like 30 or so, but I just kind of pick them up at random. I don't go for the later ones. Like I always check and see how like far into the series it is, because I know like kind of near the end there is a little bit of a plot with how Poirot like dies and stuff, so I just kind of pick them up at random, and they are like fully formed stories in their own right. Like you can just read them as standalones, so that's what I do. once you read a few, you kind of get used to some of the characters that reappear, but there's never really like a flowing storyline through like multiple books. So if you want to start with Agatha Christie, this probably would be a great place to start. Also, Murder on the Orient Express is one of my favourites, or The Mysterious Affair at Styles, which is the first Poirot book. So if you want to start from the beginning, start with Mysterious Affair at Styles. And my final 4-star read for the month is The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake by Aimee Bender. This one, Sophie from Portal of the Pages got me for Christmas, and I loved it. I thought it was really, really brilliant. I loved the kind of magical realism element of the story. So basically, this follows a young girl who can taste people's emotions through food that they cook for her. It starts when she's very young, and her mum cooks her a lemon cake for her birthday, and as she's eating it, she can feel all these really deeply sad and like alone kind of feelings, and feelings of like being scared and alone and things. And she comes to the conclusion that that's come from her mum, and her mum has poured her emotions into the food that she's made, and they've stuck there, and somehow she is managing to taste them. What I love the most was that element of the story didn't like overtake everything, because I think it could have been very easy for the author to just focus on that as a main point and just go from meal to meal of her tasting different meals and feeling other people's emotions. But that, like, once that was introduced, it kind of took the back burn, and the plot and everything else kind of went with that, but it wasn't like the main part of the story, and I really enjoyed that. There were also other elements of magical realism kind of splattered through the story amongst her family members, and I loved how that kind of just quietly went underneath as well. Like, it wasn't like a huge thing, it was just normal. Like it wasn't like, oh, magic, like that's amazing. It was just like it was normal, like it was meant to be there. So yes, if you haven't read anything with magical realism as an element of the story, I would highly recommend this one because it's just so wonderfully written. I really, really, really enjoyed it. So I think I will be picking up something else from Aimee Bender soon. Let me know if you have any recommendations. So now moving on to probably the most exciting part of this video, my 5-star reads. Firstly, we have a reread, which was To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I read this as a kind of book buddy thing with my friends. We've got like a in real life book club, and this was the book that we chose. This is such an old battered copy as well. The back has actually fallen off now. I think I'm gonna have to try and tape it back together, but I lent my like new copy to my friend so that she could read it, so I had to go with the old one. I'm not going to talk about this one too much today, just because I've spoken about it many times on this channel before, because it is one of my all-time favourite books. It's definitely one of my all-time favourite classics. If you haven't yet read To Kill a Mockingbird, I implore you to do so. It is a phenomenal novel. Like, I love it so much, and every time I reread it, I love it even more. So yes, definitely a high recommendation from me for this one. Next for my 5-star reads is a graphic novel, and that is The Arrival by Shaun Tan. This book was wonderful, and what made it like even more wonderful to me and amazing to me was the fact that it has absolutely no words in it. It's completely done through pitch. The story basically follows this man here in this picture, and he is taken away from his family. He moves away. He's basically gone away from his family to scout out a new place for them to live, and with the fact that he's in a new place, he can't understand what people are saying, and he's trying to kind of integrate himself in and trying to envision whether his family can live there with him. The actual illustration style is stunning. I have never seen something so beautiful as this. It's one of those that I just want to like take all of the pictures out and just stick them on my wall because they are so beautiful. So yes, if you haven't yet experienced a graphic novel told solely with pictures and no words at all, I would highly recommend this one. Also, if you have read anything from Shaun Tan and you have any recommendations for what I should read next, do let me know, because I do want to pick up something else from him soon. So moving on to my final 5-star read for the month, and definitely my favourite book of the month, and that is When Breath Becomes Air by Kalanithi. This was my non-fiction book of the month, and it just blew me away. Like, I don't even know if I can really fully explain how fantastic this book was. So Kalanithi is sadly no longer alive. He wrote this book during a time when he was dying of lung cancer. The thing that grabbed me with this book was the fact that Paul, before he died, was a neurosurgeon and a neuroscientist. So he quite often worked on patients like himself. His role as being a doctor who does surgery on people with such illnesses as his was completely flipped, and he then became the patient, and he then kind of saw it from the other angle. And oh, it was just heartbreaking. The first chunk of this book, he tells the story of how he came to be a neuroscientist or a neurosurgeon, and all the hard work that he put in, and all of the patients and the things that affected him so deeply and made him really want to do that as a job. The second half then focuses on his personal journey and his diagnosis with lung cancer, and how him and his wife try to fight and get through it all. When he got his diagnosis, he almost took a step back and realised in himself that he wanted to be a writer, as well as doing all of the other things that he had accomplished at that point in his life. He knew that at some point he wanted to write a book, so that's when he sat down and kind of tackled writing this before he died. And my goodness guys, this book was fantastic, written fantastically. Like, it makes me sad when I read books from people who have died, because I think, God, what a shame that you're never going to be able to read anything from that person again, because, like, you know, death has taken them. And it's really, really sad, because this was brilliantly written. The epilogue is written by his wife, and that is equally as well written as well. Like, I think that she also had a fantastic voice. It's a wonderful book. I hope I am giving it justice. I don't know if I am, but yes, if you haven't read it already, I would highly recommend. There we are, those are all the books that I read in January. Do let me know if you read any of these and what you thought of them. Also let me know what books you read in January. Come and talk to me in the comments. As always, I will leave links to Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, everything I've mentioned today down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and I will see you soon. Bye!